The first time I noticed it was at the Sunday dinner, the one sacred, unbreakable tradition in the Kane family. You didn't miss Sunday dinner, not unless you were dead, or had a signed affidavit from God himself explaining a better offer. Grandfather Kane sat at the head of the table, a king on a throne of dark, polished mahogany. He was 81, but carried himself with the rigid, unyielding posture of a man half his age. His hands, gnarled with veins like old tree roots, didn't shake as he lifted his glass of Bordeaux. They were steady, always steady. That's what made it so strange. We were halfway through Aunt Margaret's dry, over-seasoned roast beef, a culinary offense we all suffered through in silent, martyred solidarity when it happened. Grandfather had been uncharacteristically quiet, his ice blue eyes, the same ones we'd all inherited, in varying shades of weakness, scanning the table. He was taking us in, my father Richard, his eldest, nervously discussing municipal bond yields with his wife, my mother Carol, who was nodding a little too vigorously, my uncle David, the free spirit, picking at the label of his craft beer and looking bored, his wife, Lydia, shooting daggers at their teenage twins, who were surreptitiously texting under the table, and me, just trying to get through the meal without being asked for the 10th time why I'm still wasting my talent writing freelance articles instead of getting a real job at the firm. Grandfather set his fork down with a quiet, precise click that silenced the low murmur of conversation. All eyes turned to him. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at his plate, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his right hand where it rested on the tablecloth. Then he looked up, and his gaze was cloudy, confused. It was a look he'd never seen on him before. My grandfather's mind was a steel trap. It didn't do confusion. "Richard," he said, his voice a low rumble, but softer than usual, lacking its definitive edge. "This wine, it tastes metallic. Does it taste metallic to you?" My father, ever the eager to please son, immediately took a hurried sip from his own glass. He swirled it, frowned with a performance worthy of a community theatre wine critic. "No, Dad, tastes fine to me. 85 Bordeaux, beautiful notes of a blackcurrant." He shot a look at my mother, who nodded furiously in agreement. Grandfather's eyes didn't leave my father's face. "Metallic," he repeated, slower this time, "like copper, or old pennies." He brought his napkin to his lips and gave a dry, rattling cough. It wasn't a dramatic, hacking cough. It was subtle, a weak, papery sound. My stomach has been unsettled all week, a strange bitterness right at the back of my throat. Can't seem to shake it. He let the statement hang in the air, a dead thing on the table next to the roast beef. Then he picked up his fork again, the tremor gone as suddenly as it had appeared, and took another small, deliberate bite. The conversation tried to stutter back to life, but it was brittle now, forced. We were all watching him, a family of hawks suddenly unsure if the old lion was sick or just playing. That was the seed, planted right there between the salt cellar and the water glasses. The following Sunday, the performance escalated. He arrived looking paler, the famous Kane vitality seeming leached from him. He moved slower, his steps more careful. He declined the wine altogether. "Doctor's orders," he said with a wan smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just water for me. My system seems to be rejecting things it used to enjoy." He drank from his crystal tumbler, and halfway through the meal, he froze. His hand went to his stomach. His face contorted in a brief, sharp wince of pain. "It was so fast I almost missed it. Almost. Damn," he muttered, almost to himself, but in the tomb quiet room, it echoed. "The cramps are back. Vicious little things. Come out of nowhere." Uncle David, who'd been scrolling through his phone, looked up, a flicker of genuine concern on his face. "Cramps, Dad? You should see someone. Could be an ulcer." Grandfather fixed him with a weary look. "I've seen 3 someones, David. They poke, they prod, they take vials of blood. They find nothing. It's a mystery." He paused, letting the word mystery sink its hooks in. One of them, a young fellow, asked the strangest question. Asked about my diet, if anything had changed, if I was eating or drinking anything new. He took a slow sip of water, his eyes drifting over the spread on the table, the food we had all cooked, or brought, or paid for, the food we were all about to share. "It's as if my body," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that forced us all to lean in, "is reacting to a presence it doesn't recognize." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the sub-zero fridge in the next room. You could hear the frantic, guilty pounding of your own heart. A presence. He didn't say poison. He didn't have to. The word materialized in the center of the table, glowing and toxic, fed by a lifetime of his money and our quiet, desperate want for it. The paranoia didn't bloom overnight, it metastasized slowly, cell by cell. It started with little things. My mother, Carol, began insisting on serving everyone herself, ladling the soup from a large tureen directly into bowls, her smile tight. "No sense everyone getting up," she'd say, her eyes darting around. She was making sure no one had unsupervised access to grandfather's portion. Aunt Lydia, who was famously lazy and had never lifted a finger in this house, suddenly became obsessed with helping Maria, grandfather's ancient, long-suffering housekeeper, in the kitchen. She'd hover, watching the pots, taste-testing the sauces with a theatrical flourish. She wasn't helping. She was guarding. She was ensuring no one else could interfere with the food before it came out. The real shift happened at the third dinner. Grandfather had been particularly frail that night, complaining of dizziness, of a constant, low-grade nausea. Head pushed his plate away after only a few bites. "It's no use," Head sighed, closing his eyes. It all turns to ash in my mouth." The tension was a physical thing, a fifth guest at the table, sucking the air from the room. We were eating a lemon tart for dessert, a thing grandfather had always loved. He took one small bite and shuddered. "Bitter," he pronounced, "so terribly bitter." My father, his face a mask of strained concern, blurted out, "Maybe it's the tart, Dad." "Lydia, you made the dessert tonight, didn't you?" Maybe the lemons were off. It was a stupid, innocent thing to say, but in the charged atmosphere, it was a declaration of war. Lydia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fury, and something else raw, naked fear. "What are you implying, Richard? That he'd try to poison him with a tart? That's absurd. I bought the lemons from Whole Foods this morning. The receipt is in my purse if you'd like to audit it. I'm not implying anything." My father shot back, his voice rising. "I'm just saying, Dad says it's bitter, and you made it. It's a simple observation, a simple observation." David slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "It sounds like a fucking accusation, Rick. Why don't you look closer to home? Carol's been playing waiter every week, making sure she's the one to serve the old man. Seems pretty controlling to me. Seems like someone who wants to make very sure what goes on his plate. How dare you?" My mother shrieked, her voice cracking. "I'm trying to make things easier for him. Something you'd know nothing about, you freeloading wastrel. All you ever do is come here with your hand out." The twins, Sophie and Chris, stared at their parents, their faces pale with horror. I just sat there, a spectator to the unraveling, my own heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. This was the rot, laid bare. And grandfather, he sat through it all. He didn't try to stop them. He didn't raise his voice. He just watched. His head was slightly bowed, as if in sorrow, but from my angle, I could see his eyes. Those cold, clear, ice blue eyes. They were alive. They were sharp. They were drinking in every vicious word, every spat insult, every shattered piece of familial pretense. There was no confusion in them now. There was only a cold, terrifying intensity. He was enjoying it. The fights stopped being confined to Sunday dinners. They spilled out into text chains that exploded at 2 a.m, full of venom and legal threats. They happened in whispered arguments in the driveway before anyone even reached the front door. My uncle hired a private financial auditor, convinced my father was siphoning money from the family holding company to make his own inheritance look bigger. My father, in turn, hired a full-time nurse to look after grandfather, a stern-looking woman named Brenda, whose primary function seemed to be to stand in the kitchen and stare at everyone with open suspicion, effectively preventing anyone else from getting near the food. The house, once a place of stifling, opulent boredom, became a castle under siege, and we were all both the attackers and the guards. No one trusted anyone. Our offered cup of coffee was viewed as a potential assassination attempt. A brought box of chocolates was treated like a biohazard, left unopened on the sideboard until it was thrown away. I found myself caught in it, too. The poison was in the air, and we were all breathing it. I started watching my own parents differently. Was my father's concern a little too performative? Was my mother's servitude a little too convenient? I'd catch Uncle David looking at grandfather not with worrying, but with a kind of calculating impatience, like a man waiting for a bus that was terribly late. The thought crossed my mind, dark and ugly. Which one of them is it? I never once, not for a single second, believed it was me. But I started to believe it was one of them. That's the genius of it. He made us believe the monster was in the room with us. He made us see it in each other's eyes. Grandfather's health continued its mysterious decline. He took to using a cane, a beautiful piece of polished malacca that he didn't seem to need for balance so much as for effect. He'd thump it lightly on the floor for emphasis. He started talking about his will, about revisions, about loyalty and betrayal in the same vague, ominous breath. The pot was kept at a perpetual, agonizing simmer. The breaking point came on a roused Sunday that felt more like a wake. Grandfather announced he'd been to a new specialist, a toxicologist from Switzerland. A very thorough man, he said, his voice a thin rasp. He was in his armchair by the fire, a blanket over his knees, though it was 70 degrees outside. We were arranged around him like mourners. Hayes running one final battery of tests. Extremely sensitive. He says he'll be able to identify the precise contaminant that's been affecting me. He says the evidence will be undeniable. He let that land. The evidence will be undeniable. The results, he said, looking at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering for a heartbeat too long on each guilty, terrified face, will be back next week. If asked him to email them to me directly, he'll review them alone. And then we will all know the truth. It was the longest week of my life. The silence from my family was total. The group text was dead. The phone didn't ring. It was as if we were all holding our breath, waiting for the guillotine to fall. I didn't sleep. I played out every scenario in my head. Who would it be? Which one of us had he named the villain? My money was on Uncle David. He was the easiest target, the least responsible, the one with the most obvious motive. Or maybe it was Lydia, with her bitter resentment. I mentally prepared myself for the revelation, for the scandal, for the police, for the ugly, public tearing apart of our family. The following Sunday, we gathered for what we all felt would be the Last Supper. The air was thick with a fatalistic dread. Grandfather was already in his chair when we arrived. He looked different. The pallor was gone. The feigned weakness had vanished. He sat upright, the blanket absent. His eyes were clear and focused. On the small table beside him was a single sheet of paper. We took our seats without a word. There was no pretense of meal this time. No one had brought anything. We just sat, waiting for the executioner's axe. Grandfather let the silence stretch, drawing out the agony. He picked up the piece of paper, glanced at it, then set it down again. The results came, he said. His voice was different. It was the old voice, the voice of boardrooms and commands, the voice that brooked no argument. It was strong. It was powerful. It was completely devoid of sickness. A collective, almost imperceptible flinch went around the room. The toxicologist was, as I said, very thorough. He continued, a faint, cruel smile playing on his lips. He tested for everything. Arsenic, thallium, ricin, polonium, every slow, insidious poison you think of. He even tested 4 things I'd never heard of. He paused, picking up his glass of water. He didn't sip it. He just held it, swirling the contents slightly. The results were fascinating, he said, his voice dropping to a conversational, almost jovial tone. It was grotesque. They found absolutely nothing. Not a trace. Not a single foreign chemical. My system, according to the most advanced medical science money can buy, is perfectly clean. For a man of my age, I am in remarkably good health. The confusion in the room was a tangible thing. We looked at each other, bewildered. My father was the first to find his voice. But Dad, the symptoms, the nausea, the cramps, the bitterness, or the symptoms, Grandfather said, his smile widening. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a spider watching a fly finally stop struggling in its web. Yes, the symptoms, the metallic taste, a simple side effect of a new toothpaste Maria bought. I switched back to my old brand last Tuesday. It's gone. The dizziness, a minor inner ear infection, cleared up with a 5-day course of antibiotics my doctor prescribed a month ago. The nausea, the cramps, he shrugged, a gesture of supreme, dismissive indifference. Stress, perhaps, or a particularly persistent case of indigestion. Certainly not poisoning. The truth didn't dawn on us slowly. It hit us all at once, a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. I saw my father's jaw go slack. My mother brought a trembling hand to our mouth. Uncle David looked like he'd been punched in the gut. It was a test, Grandfather said, the words dropping into the stunned silence like stones. A simple test of character, of loyalty, of basic human decency. He leaned forward, his eyes now gleaming with a cold, unholy fire. All the pretended frailty was gone, burned away to reveal the hard, ruthless core of the man underneath. And you all failed, spectacularly. He picked up the piece of paper again, and with a slow, deliberate motion, he tore it in half. Then he tore it again, and again, letting the fragments flutter to the floor. There was no toxicologist. There was no report. There was only ever me, watching you, listening to you, watching you turn on each other like a pack of rabid dogs, fighting over a bone that wasn't even yours yet. His voice rose, not in volume, but in intensity, lashing us like a whip. The paranoia, the accusations, the sheer, naked greed I have witnessed in this room, it was more sickening than any poison could ever be. You saw a weak old man, and you saw a dollar sign. You didn't see a father, a grandfather. You saw a transaction, a problem to be solved, or a prize to be won. He stood up. He didn't use the cane. He didn't need it. He drew himself to his full height, and he was every inch the patriarch, the emperor, passing judgment. My revenge, he said. The word hanging in the air, cold and final, was not in cutting you off. That is merely the consequence. My revenge was the show. The past few months, watching you destroy each other for my amusement, it was better than cable. He looked at each of us, his gaze stripping us bare, exposing the petty, avaricious creatures we were. The will has been changed. The trusts have been dissolved. The company shares have been sold. Every single asset, every property, every stock, every bond has been liquidated. The proceeds, every last cent, have been donated to the Kane Charitable Foundation, which, as of last Thursday, is under new management entirely separate from this family. The air left the room. It was a death sentence. It was the guillotine falling. It was the utter, total annihilation of everything we had assumed was our birthright. You get nothing, he said, his voice flat and absolute. Not a penny. Not a paper clip from this house. It's over. The Kane fortune died with me tonight, though I plan on living for many more years, just to enjoy the memory of this moment. He walked to the door of the study, then turned back for one final look at the ruins of his family, sitting shattered and silent in the opulent room. You spent your lives waiting for me to die, he said. Turns out, I just had to sit back and watch you kill each other first. It was far more entertaining. He closed the door behind him with a soft, definitive click. There was no shouting, no crying, not then. There was just the vast, echoing silence of a bomb crater. We sat there for a long time, not looking at each other, surrounded by the beautiful, expensive things we would never own. The real poison was never in his food or his wine. It was in us. It was the greed he had nurtured in us our whole lives, the dependency he had cultivated, and with one masterful, vicious performance, he had finally forced us to swallow it. and now we were dying from the inside out. The old man hadn't just cut us off. He had given us exactly what we deserved, a taste of our own medicine, and it was the most bitter thing I will ever know.